the Lira crisis in Turkey has been detrimental to the totality of the Turkish state, and additionally, the Turks don't even realize how poor the Lira is performing. And this is something that is, of course, not great for Turkey. Hello and welcome back to the Traveling Report. Today I wanted to go over why exactly Turkey had a Lira crisis and how realistically it impacts not just Turkey but also the Turkish people, and how this has led to massive immigration outside of Turkey in the last few years. As many of you will know, I have been in Turkey for the past few days, learning about how the Lira crisis has shaped itself, and of course this has been extremely poor optically from any perspective you look at it. Of course, tourism at first was a saving grace, as you got dollar inflows, you got people spending money and really driving the economy forward. However, then you look at how pricing went up and the middle class completely vanished. So you now have the wealthy Turks and you have the poor Turks. It is one of the most unequal countries now in the world, and it is visible, right? You definitely see the inequality of Turkey, especially on the ground in Istanbul, where people who work in shops can't even afford to buy things from said shop. And this is absolutely not good for domestic spending. This is not good for future growth. This is detrimental to the economy in the long term. And of course, if you look at the factual bases of how the Lira has been performing, it has devalued quite substantially. And of course, even buying this tea is significantly more expensive than it was even just a few years prior. And of course, spending this much money on Turkey has made me realize that indeed I did take for granted the amount of freedom, right, I had in Turkey just a few years prior. I was here in June of 2022, went around, saw all of Turkey and how it was operating then, and it operated much better, as even though, yes, the inflation had gone up, it didn't have the same dollar demand, it didn't have the same forex demands, which pushed the prices even higher, which now they're out of forex. People aren't wanting to visit as much, as, of course, the dollar demand made the prices priced in dollars as opposed to lira, and so you have a situation where a meal at McDonald's here in Turkey is more expensive than a meal at McDonald's in Romania or Bulgaria, which the lev is very closely tracked by the euro, and vice versa. The Romanian lei is very closely tracked by the euro, albeit less so than the lev. You have countries where realistically, right, a McDonald's meal should be more expensive. They are far wealthier, being less expensive, being easier to get, and realistically being less of a luxury than it is in Turkey. And as I go to Georgia, it's almost half the cost, right? Half the cost. And so invariably you get a difference of how things operate, and you get a pricing crunch of the totality of cost of living being so high that no normal Turk can afford it. And of course, there are Turks that can afford it, right? There are Turks that are living just fine. Those happen to be connected to government. I won't get too much into the mafia states in this video, but I may in the near future. You can tell, right, with all of the billionaires, they have some links to the government in some way. And so, in essence, you get large amounts of wealthy people, but then you get a large amount, even larger amounts of poor people who cannot afford basic costs of living. And some may say, oh, well, this is just Thailand, this is just like Mexico, this is just like South Africa. And sure, there are parallels, absolutely, and I think that those are fair comparisons. However, do you really want to be like Mexico? Do you really want to be like South Africa? Do you really want to be like Thailand? And Thailand, don't get me wrong, I love Thailand, I love South Africa, I love Mexico, right? I love the people. But to say their economy is going in the correct direction would be incorrect. As realistically, for example, in Mexico, Carlos Slim owns a large amount of the Mexican economy. One person, Carlos Slim. And this includes banks, real estate, telecommunications. You don't want that to happen, right? You don't want regulatory capture where you create an oligarchic class. And the reason why is twofold, right? One, oligarchs are targeted not just domestically, but internationally. Two, you entirely remove your country from a business perspective. And so this Lira crisis has created an oligarchic class where inflation is typically 40 to 50% per year. And no one can afford things anymore. And this creates resentment, this creates people leaving, which we've seen some of the largest numbers of migration since 2020 outside of Turkey. And as time goes on, I believe that realistically more will come. Now, this is actually not inherently too bad for those who are looking to invest. Of course, Istanbul real estate, which I talked about in another video. Feel free to drop down to the channel down below and feel free to subscribe while you're at it. In Istanbul, the cost of property is not that expensive, right? Relative to the region. It's about maybe a third of what it is in Bucharest. It's maybe a half of what it is in Sofia. It's maybe a fourth of what it is in Athens. And so you get this very interesting dynamic where inflation is high, but property costs are low. So it creates an interesting dynamic for sure. That said, of course, if you're looking to learn more about Turkey or where to go, how to move, feel free to book a consulting call down in the description down below. If you liked this video, feel free to like it. If you really like this video, feel free to share it with your friends. If you're looking to join me on this internationalization journey and you want to never miss an upcoming video, feel free to subscribe and feel free to put notifications on. This has been the Travel Report, signing off.